When you're in the way of waking up and finding out who you really are, what you do is what the whole universe is doing at the place you call here and now. You are something the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is something that the whole ocean is doing. The real you is not a puppet which life pushes around. The real deep down you is the whole universe. So then, when you die, you're not going to have to put up with everlasting non-existence, because that's not an experience. A lot of people are afraid that when they die, they're gonna be locked up in a dark room forever and sort of undergo that. But one of the most interesting things in the world, this is a yoga. This is a way of realization. Try and imagine what it will be like to go to sleep and never wake up. Think about that. Children, think about that. It's one of the great wonders of life. What will it be like to go to sleep and never wake up? And if you think long enough about that, something will happen to you. You will find out, among other things, that it will pose the next question to you. What was it like to wake up after having never gone to sleep? That was when you were born. You see, you can't have an experience of nothing. Nature abhors a vacuum. So after you're dead, the only thing that can happen is the same experience, or the same sort of experience when you were born. In other words, we all know very well that after people die, other people are born. And they're all you. Only you can only experience one at a time. Everybody is I. You all know you're you, and wheresoever beings exist throughout all galaxies, it doesn't make any difference. You are all of them. And when they come into being, that's you coming into being. You know that very well. Only you don't have to remember the past in the same way you don't have to think about how you work your thyroid gland, or whatever else it is in your organism. You don't have to know how to shine the sun. You just do it like you breathe. Doesn't it really astonish you that you are the fantastically complex thing, and that you're doing all of this, and you never had any education in how to do it? At the same time that human consciousness is a form of awareness and sensitivity and understanding, it's also a form of ignorance. Our ordinary, everyday consciousness leaves out more than it takes in, things that are terribly important. For example, it leaves out things that would, if we did know them, allay our anxieties and fears and horrors. If we could extend our awareness to those things that we leave out, we would experience a deep inner peace, because we would all know the one thing we aren't supposed to know. According to one of the rules of our particular social game, You're simply not allowed to know the lowdown on life. On one hand, lowdown means the real dirt on things, but it also means that which is profound, that which is mysterious, that which is in the depths. And the lowdown is that incredibly important aspect of existence that our everyday consciousness screens out. Our senses are selective, and we are sensitive only to a small band of sensations, so we're missing an enormous range of vibrations outside of that band. Cosmic rays, ultraviolet rays, gamma rays, and so on. And I'm also referring to what our instruments are capable of detecting. There are even vibrations that escape their notice. The universe is a vast system of vibrations full of infinite possibility. When you play a harp, you don't just run your fingers back and forth over all the strings. That makes a terrible sound. You select certain strings in a pattern. You pick out particular notes, and these make a pattern. But at the same time, there are strings you leave out and notes you don't play in the fundamental continuity of the harp. So what have you left out? That's an absolutely basic question for all of us. You are focused on certain things that constitute what you think of as everyday reality. You single out certain people, certain aspects of buildings, pieces of landscape, parts of the sky, and you actually see the world as a collection of rather disjointed things and events. But you left something out. You forgot something. I'm not talking about your pants or your wig or your glasses, but something absolutely essential. Everyone has forgotten it, and one way to rediscover that thing. And one way to rediscover that thing is through asking the question, who are you? In response, you might say, well, I'm Harry Wilson, or whatever your name happens to be. And if I push the issue and say, no, don't give me that stuff. Who are you really? You might take offense, or think I'm talking nonsense, or playing some kind of trick on you. But really, deep down, who are you? Because that's the thing we've all missed, the thing that's been forgotten, the thing we left out, the underside of the tapestry. What we are all carefully taught to ignore is that every one of us is an act, a function, a performance, a manifestation of the entire cosmos, what you might call God or Brahman or the Tao. Every one of us is actually that, but we are pretending with tremendous skill and deception that we're not. Now, where it's really at is living on two levels at once. If you live the life of your ordinary ego and play your role in life and observe all your particular rules and so on, while at the same time understanding the lowdown, you see the big picture, then you're what I call a really swinging human being. But most of us just live on the ordinary level and think that's all there is. So life becomes a drag, and we feel we must survive, and we work and work at surviving, and our children inherit the very same attitude. And nobody has any fun because we're just compulsively trying to get through it all and go on. And people get fed up, and people get fed up, and feel like they can't live this way. And some decide to check out and commit suicide. Well, that makes sense in a way. With that attitude toward life, who wants to feel like they have to go on living? Of course, life doesn't have to be that way. Not at all. Life can be quite joyful and spontaneous. The Taoist word for nature means of itself so. That is, nature is spontaneous. You don't have to force it. It just happens. The fundamental principle in Buddhism is no purpose. Purposelessness. When the Buddha needed to fart, he didn't say, at 9 o'clock, I'm going to drop a fart. The fart just happens by itself. So, a thing happens of itself. You don't have to tell a fart it ought to happen. That puts it in a bind. It's just like telling a child to come and play its game in front of a crowded audience of relatives on Thanksgiving. It absolutely bugs children when you do that. This is the problem for every artist, dancers, musicians, painters, and so on. Because artists make their living by playing, and playing on demand, particularly in public at such and such a time, is not an easy thing to learn. I refers to this contrivance as a controlled accident. But back to my earlier point, we have been educated to use our minds in a narrow way. We have been taught to ignore that every one of us is an aperture through which the whole cosmos experiences life. Every one of us is a hole from which the fundamental light, existence itself, looks out, but we're playing the game of forgetting this fact, and we pretend to only be this little hole, this little thing we call me, or the ego, or Harry Wilson, or whatever. But if we can maintain a sense of being Harry Wilson, while at the same time understanding we are the whole works, then that's a very marvelous and agreeable arrangement. If you can carry these two perspectives at once, you will experience a most remarkable harmoniousness. It will bring your life a great sense of joy and exuberance, because you know that all the serious predicaments of life are a game. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to take your individual life seriously, but you could also see your problems and challenges as manifestations of nature, like patterns in waves, or waves in the ocean, or shells upon the beach. Have you really looked at a seashell? There's not an aesthetic fault in it anywhere. It's absolutely perfect. Now, do you think that shells look at each other and critique each other's appearance? Well, your markings are a little crooked and not very well spaced. Of course not, but that's what we do. Every one of us is marvelous and complicated and interesting and gorgeous just as we are. Really, take a look into another person's eyes. They are jewelry beyond compare, just beautiful. We have specialized in a certain kind of awareness that makes us neglectful of seeing that. We're quite good at briefly concentrated, pinpoint attention. We look at this and we look at that, and we select only a handful of certain things from all the things we might possibly be aware of. In doing so, we leave out the experience of amazing beauty in our daily experience, as well as the sense of unity with the total process of being. We stare at features in the landscape and ignore the background. We can also talk about the web of life in terms of magnification. For example, if you examine a piece of embroidery, you'll find it to be an ordered and beautiful object. But if you look at the same object under a microscope, it will appear to be a hopeless tangle of messy thread. But if you zoom in with greater magnification to examine an individual thread, you'll find fantastic order in the most gorgeous designs of molecules. Then, if you keep turning up the magnification, you'll find chaos again. Do it again, and you'll see marvelous order. In this way, order and randomness constitute the warp and the woof. We wouldn't know what order was unless we experienced messes. In the same way, the contrast of on and off, there and not there, life and death, being and non-being, constitutes existence. Only we pretend that the random side of things, this disorderly side of things, could take over and win the competition. When you lose sight of the fact that the order principle and the chaos principle go together, that's the same predicament as losing sight of the fact that all individually delineated things and beings are connected. Individual mountains stick out of the earth, but there's a fundamental earth underneath all mountains. So all of us are different things that stick out of reality, but there's a continuity underneath, and we ignore that. That's the thing we leave out. We get hung up on death, but death is merely an interval, an aspect of the wave. Take sound, for example. Everything we call sound is actually sound silence. There's no such thing as pure sound. If there were, you wouldn't be able to hear it. What you actually hear is a series of taps against the eardrum. But it happens so quickly that you get more of an impression of sound than you do of silence. But between every little undulation of sound, there is also an interval. When you listen to music and hear the melody, What makes the melody significant are the steps between tones. So the interval between whatever happens is just as important as what happens. Sound and silence, life and death, warp and woof,